Check 1, 2. Please take your seats and remember to visit the coat check after the show. It's gonna be a cold night. We have a real thriller for you tonight. It's a zombie story. And we've had many fine zombie stories over the seasons, but too bad none of them are actually about zombies. At the tail end of a renaissance of the zombie setting, The Last of Us and its HBO adaptation have received unanimous critical and commercial acclaim. Telltale's The Walking Dead was considered some of the best storytelling in the medium and was the best Telltale game released, and very quickly became second best.
It says Bricklebit in an older Elvish hand.
What's Bricklebit?
A magic word.
What's it do?
Makes animals shit gold.
Resident Evil is the biggest horror franchise on the planet, set the internet on fire multiple times, giving us the greatest character in gaming, Tyrell.
Where'd that cop go? Don't know, don't care.
You saved my life.
Sure as shit didn't.
Oh, and Carlos.
It's alright, you're going ahead. I'm not gonna die on you and leave you in a cold, cold Carlos.
Not to mention indie sleeper Project Zomboid and Call of Duty's saving grace with the zombies mode. Dead Space's remake returned it to the court of survival horror royalty, and Diablo 4 lets me do this. It's impossible to talk about every zombie game, even if it seems like I got close. But look back at that list and ask an important question. In this universe, where do the zombies come from? There are three major sections: Evil Corporation, Weird Occult Shit, and Feels Weird After COVID. In the Evil Corporation section, we have Resident Evil and Dead Space. Weird Occult Shit has Diablo 4, COD Zombies, but also Dead Space. And Feels Weird After COVID has The Last of Us, The Walking Dead, Project Zomboid, and also Resident Evil, cause like, you know, quarantining in Florida felt a lot like this.
Eat it. It's good.
But this is necessary information. Where a zombie game falls on this chart helps us find out the premise of that game. Is it about finding family, corporate greed, this shit, or defending your home and your family tirelessly and fearlessly in the face of an unstoppable force?
Most of them wanted me to ask you this question. Why didn't you do more to put Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda out of business when you...
My guys have converted some subway cars into a shelter. It's safe.
I'm fine.
Personal space. Okay, I get it. Let's go.
Every one of these stories has a premise. It's about a sentence long, and it tells us what the story is about, and what unites all of them is that their premises are wrought from the same catalyst: mass necrotic transformation, more commonly known as a zombie apocalypse. So what is a premise? In the theatrical sense, the one that matters to us, a premise is described as the motivating power behind everything we do. And in the world of analysis, let's just call it the one-sentence synopsis you can make about a story where its theme leads to its conclusion. Zombie apocalypses are excellent premise engines. The enemy is simple to understand in any setting. Dead people are coming back and they are not happy. You get a lot of freedom to shape the world, but the biggest thing is that the world is shaken. Because the status quo is ripped away, the way the characters interact with the newly forming society and the monsters trying to destroy it is super malleable. A premise is going to look like a quick sentence that will explain what the story is about. Think of it like what you'd put on the poster or what you tell your mom when she asks what a game is about. It's important for a few reasons. It gives our story a sense of purpose and direction, almost like a roadmap. It tells us the lesson we should be learning from the story. And when something screws with the premise, it makes you ask the most important question in all of academia. What did they mean by this? Sometimes the game itself tells you the premise, or at least gives you a solid idea.
Right. Well, in the meantime, you are here, and it's beautiful, and escaping isn't always something bad.
Bad as those things are, at least they're predictable. The normal people that scare me. You of all people should understand that.
I'll be right downstairs. Daddy won't let those weird fairy tale monsters get you.
In this game, the baby crawls left towards danger. You click the button to move him back to the right, and if he reaches the fire, you fail.
All this death wasn't caused by a monster-making virus. It was greed. Human greed.
That's all it is. Super simple, the way the theme leads to its conclusion. Human greed leads to death. Resident Evil 3 seems like a game about zombies, but the protagonist consistently frames the disaster as the fault of corporate greed. This is reinforced by Carlos being an ignorant employee of that company. And he understands the role that he's playing. He disagrees with corporate orders. The developer of the world-saving vaccine isn't killed by zombies, he's killed by Umbrella operatives. Of the two major antagonists, one of them sees the apocalypse as an opportunity for personal and financial gain.
To impart on you is getting through. Now I know you can't put a price on life. But I'm in this business to get paid.
The other one's a giant meat monster. Unlike Dead Space or Resident Evil 4, he has no ideological or religious motivations. He is purely focused on self-preservation and cash. Now, let's compare Nikolai from Resident Evil 3 with Bill from The Last of Us. They are certainly both interested in self-preservation.
Once upon a time, I had somebody that I cared about. A partner. Somebody I had to look after. And in this world, that sort of shit's good for one thing: getting you killed. So you know what I did? I wisened the fuck up. And I realized it's gotta be just me. You keep babysitting long enough, and eventually it's gonna blow up in your face.
Can we please just get on with it?
Here. Let's get on with it.
Bill isn't nearly as malicious as Nikolai, but we see what this focus on self-preservation does to him. He's alive, sure, but what kind of life is he really living? He's in an infected town, he has nobody to care for and nothing to live for. He's just kind of going through the motions. While Resident Evil 3 is much more explicit, I mean, Nikolai gets killed in a nuke, neither one of these men are able to truly survive their own self-importance. Their lack of empathy leads to their destruction. So in their respective stories, why does Bill get to live and Nikolai doesn't? Let's talk about another theatricals term, the significance of the title. The game is called The Last of Us. This title not only refers to the last human beings alive in the apocalypse, but the last bits of humanity that they have. And Bill doesn't really have much left.
That girl nearly got us killed.
You gotta admit, she did hold her own back there.
You ain't gonna make it.
While instead of Nikolai, Bill might not die, it's arguably led to something far worse. He's a shell. Compare Virgin Bill to Chad Tommy. Both of these men live in the same world under the same rules, but while Bill lives in his dying town, Tommy is growing a community. He's helping get electricity, he has a wife. He has reasons to not go with Joel and risk his life. So while a character's lack of empathy might be seen as a strength, in The Last of Us, it's subtly shown to be a weakness. So while in Resident Evil 3, human greed leads to death, in The Last of Us, disconnecting from our own sense of humanity is what leads to death. And this is why it's so important to figure out the source of the zombies. Let's go back to the chart. The different tones and themes of these settings are designed to support the premise. We know that Resident Evil will have something to do with greed because the enemy is a billion-dollar corporation, Umbrella. Meanwhile, the enemy in Dead Space is a little bit bigger. No first aid kit's gonna get you out of this one, but I have the cure. Turning biology into physics. And all these little details, where the zombies come from, where the game takes place, character design, character dialogue, character motivation, item descriptions, environmental storytelling. All of these little details, the invisible homework, it all comes together in service of that premise. Left 4 Dead's game mechanics and narrative drive toward a clear premise. Let's talk about it after we count up our pieces. Valve's arcadey team-based FPS takes 4 survivors: Bill, the old yet capable Vietnam War vet; Lewis, the everyman accountant with bloodstains on his designer watch; Francis, the toughest-nails biker and the greatest bear in gaming; and Zoe, the film student turned zombie death machine. You move from safe room to safe room with repeated obstacles including the zombie hordes, special infected designed to punish players going on alone, and unfortunately loud technology. 2 bosses as well, the tank who keeps telling you he doesn't use gear, and the witch. When you hear crying, lights off. But this isn't a series about me analyzing stuff for you. This is a series about us learning together how to analyze things in the future. So let's make a premise for Left 4 Dead. Step number 1, in order to analyze anything, we have to be completely familiar with every aspect of it. And with a video game, that includes gameplay. And anyone who's ever played Left 4 Dead can tell you, Left 4 Dead is about working together as a team. Every aspect of the game is designed to force you to work together. In fact, there's not much to the game other than the gameplay. There are no real cutscenes, and the narrative is pretty simple, honestly, just survivors moving from point A to point B until they get to the finale. Now, that doesn't mean the survivors are silent. They communicate all the time. Much of the dialogue is just them rambling back and forth while you play.
Check that house for supplies.
You can definitely hear a boomer. I'm grabbing this shotgun.
You born in a barn? Lock the goddamn door.
Go.
While it's proud to look and feel like a B movie, it has no aspirations to tell a narrative like a movie would. So looking at the gameplay, let's talk about a couple details. Number 1, if you run off on your own, you're easily gonna get downed and probably killed. There's different enemies called Special Infected, which are designed to stop you from going off on your own. The hunters will pounce on you and incapacitate you, the smokers will grab you, the witch will do this, I guess. Boomers will call a lot of zombies to attack you, and while these threats are easy to deal with in a group, by yourself they're impossible to deal with. A hunter will pin you instantly and incapacitate you, completely preventing you from reacting, but a buddy can just come by and shove them off super easy. And the teamwork aspect creates also a lot of the drama for Left 4 Dead. You need each other, and that means if one of you goes down, everyone suffers. In order for the teamwork to be necessary, there needs to be consequences for mistakes and betrayals. Friendly fire is on. Shooting boomers when teammates are near them will damage the teammate, and every nearby zombie is going to attack them. Shooting a car with an alarm is going to summon the zombies for everyone, and remember what I said about witches and flashlights?
In Left 4 Dead, players carry flashlights to illuminate the environment. These shadow-casting light sources not only add surface richness and provide important visual depth cues, they tie into gameplay. For example, because a player's flashlight is attached to his or her weapon, the light becomes pointed off to the side when reloading or performing a shove attack. Like so many of Left 4 Dead's game mechanics, this encourages cooperation, as players know they may be left in the dark if they choose to reload at the wrong moment.
Damn, they thought of everything. So we've talked about all the pieces, right? We've talked about how the gameplay forces you to work together, how the narrative basically implies that if you don't, you're going to die because getting to the end of the level means escaping and surviving. And this is why, even though this story isn't about zombies, like all of the other stories we've talked about, it requires zombies are there. It requires that eternal presence of danger in order to propel the characters forward. Ironically, turning most of society into monsters will make you find out who your friends are pretty quick. So what's the premise for Left 4 Dead? Let's try cooperation leads to survival. That seems to have everything we've talked about so far, and the theme leads to the conclusion. But remember when I talked about antithesis earlier? Well, Left 4 Dead has one of those too. Death Toll Chapter 3, called The Church. Nobody knows his name, but there is another survivor in this level who the captioning refers to exclusively as Church Guy. Up until this point, you don't interact with other people. You talk to them through the radio, and you maybe see what's left of them after they're gone, but up until now, this is the first person you've spoken to, and he's not letting you in the safe room.
I can't believe he bit me. No one gets in!
Hey, jerk-ass, why don't you just open the goddamn door?
You do start off hearing him talk to himself, though.
Been an hour? Been an hour? They must be immune. That's right. It must be immune. No, I have to be immune. I can't believe he bit me, Ed. I never should have let him in. I can't believe he bit me. Better safe than sorry, better safe than sorry, better safe than sorry.
He keeps repeating the same phrase, better safe than sorry. He says it over and over. It's his mantra. Better safe than sorry, better safe than sorry. I can't believe he bit me. When you approach the door and you move to get in, he starts ringing the church bell, which is going to summon a bunch of zombie hordes.
No one gets in here until I know you're immune.
We're as human as they come, son, I promise you.
I opened the door before. I got bit from my trouble. No. Better safe than sorry.
If we live through this, I'm gonna freaking kill that guy.
He's threatening you. He says, I trusted you last time. He's clearly scared of you coming in and hurting him. He wants you to prove you're immune, you're human, or he wants you to die. So we can go with a new premise. What if this guy was a dick?
I'm gonna tell that bell to shut up your ass.
So what do we know about Church Guy? Clearly the writers of the story, knowing the premise that they have, put him in here intentionally for a reason. So just like we did with Resident Evil and with The Last of Us, let's talk about this minor character and see how he supports the premise. Church Guy got bitten. At some point in the past, he let in another survivor who claimed to be immune but was secretly or unknowingly infected. That survivor bit him, and Church Guy killed them and left their body on the floor. There's a bunch of other details we could get into, but Church Guy was bitten by someone he thought we could trust. That's all we need to know. As the battle goes on, Church Guy continues to yell through the door as his voice becomes distorted, harsh, and unintelligible. This continues until the battle is over and the safe room is unlocked, at which point the survivors open the door to find that he has fully transformed into an infected. He's quickly dispatched and his story is over. The body of the person who infected him is also found on the floor, a crumpled cadaver lying next to the man she cursed. Going upstairs, you find the memorial of his delirium, as better safe than sorry is written more than 180 times on the walls in different markers. You take a glance, you open the door, and you leave the building for good, never learning anything more than the crazy man in the church. But there is one detail you pick up later on. He was right. You find out later on that the 4 survivors have been carrying the virus asymptomatically, which means that they're potentially causing the infections of every survivor they've interacted with. I hear pretty often that Church Guy is paranoid, but in his shoes, having just been bitten by one he trusted, would you not be wary to invite in 4 potential new aggressors? To call him paranoid is to look at the story both omnisciently and missing context. He's clearly experiencing some sort of mania, but in the setting of total apocalypse, how can you really be expected to trust anyone? How could you ever be expected to work as a team?
Wisen the fuck up. And I realize it's gotta be just me.
You see? You're learning. The only life that matters is wrong.
Nikolai, what are you doing?
It's not after you.
You ain't gonna make it.
Maybe Bill was right. Maybe Nikolai was right. And that's what's so interesting about Church Guy. In a game that's designed first and foremost to demand teamwork and cooperation, he is the antithesis. A minor character most people barely remember, who was killed from no fault of his own aside from his own compassion. He was killed because he tried to help someone. And the next opportunity he had to help someone was 4 people who would have infected him anyways. So what does the game say about this? Unlike Resident Evil and The Last of Us, there's no narrative closure. Nobody has any lines to really comment on it. So let's put that premise together and let's put it to work. Again, in a setting where teamwork is survival, the game acknowledges that it's also a risk. But why do we care? If everything in this game says that cooperation is what's necessary for survival, and one thing argues that it isn't, then why should we listen to it? Well, remember, this is analysis. We have to consider every single part of the game. That includes thesis that cooperation is necessary for survival, and antithesis that the only way to survive is to stick to yourself. Cooperation is your only chance for survival, but cooperation doesn't guarantee it. Putting your faith in others is dangerous. It can require risking your safety for the benefit of them. Maybe it's worth it in the end to give your friend your last medkit, or to slow down and let them keep up. You get out of the safe room to help them off the ground.
How you doing?
How bad is it?
You're okay, Zoe.
Or possibly the best thing you can do is give one moment of pure selflessness in the service of others. Left 4 Dead ends with Bill's death. In the sacrifice, the final campaign, due to circumstances of his own making, Bill has to run into certain death in order to secure the life of his companions. It is a moment of equal sadness and kindness. It is the ultimate moment of camaraderie and of teamwork. And what are Bill's dialogue options at this point? Is he angry about needing to end his own life for the safety of his friends? Is he reluctant? Are his last words a cursing of everything that has brought him here?
Goddamn cold. That's what you get for not wearing a hat. I guess you can't unmake how things end up. None of it. This is all just how it is. But you never got them, did you? They're safe. So that's just fine. I had a good run. Knowing they're safe, I wouldn't have changed a thing. I gotta admit, this ain't how I pictured it. Good enough. Good enough.
What happened with the church guy is a tragedy, and this much dramatic value, this much conflict is packed into a character who we barely communicate, who you may never even notice. He gave someone a second chance, and it was his coup de grace. But don't let that convince you it wasn't worth it. And so, all that hard work being done, we found the premise. Cooperation is the only chance for survival, but it's just a chance. You know, I'd actually never played The Last of Us before having written this video, and I was just gonna buy it and then, you know, record the intro so I could just have some footage for that little opening bit, and then I was just gonna refund it through Steam. And as soon as I started it for the first time, I played it through all the way, so that very much changed the trajectory of this video, but it was well worth it. I loved every moment of it. A sincere thank you to everyone who got to the end of this video. I really appreciate it. This video took me a long time to work on, but it's been a lot of fun, and I've loved getting to do this series. I'd like to thank specifically Nick, Kat, and Joe for their invaluable input into the script and the video. And please, to everybody who got this far and enjoyed the video, please subscribe and like it. If you have friends through Twitter or Discord, please share it with them. It would mean the world to me. Thank you.